So thank you all for joining, and I know you've all been a part of both module 1 and 2. So super excited to wrap up the series, but hopefully we have this won't be the last. We have more things planned following this session. So I think today's focus is really continuing to build on what we discussed in modules 1 and 2. Right, module 1 was looking about you as a coach working as an individual coach with coaching individuals, and how it differentiates your brand. Then we decided to scale that up to talk about teams and how we can make that more efficient. And now what we want to do is really try to bring it all together and actually explore the different ways that you can offer deeper signals to your customers and serve different needs that have not been previously possible with, say, traditional tools, because the technology doesn't support it or it's too cost prohibitive. And ultimately, all of this is in service of trying to highlight ways that you could expand your coaching offering and work at a level within the business or be embedded in the business and really support kind of the wider talent strategy. So we're going to walk through a few different use cases, and we're going to look at a specific case study with one of our energy companies around how we did this. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the land and expand approach that we take to moving towards a org-wide solution. And then we'll take a look at some of the advanced analytics that we can deliver to support this. And here we're touching much more on how Deeper Signals operates as a talent advisory service that's powered by technology. And that would obviously extend to you guys as well. I think when we look at these much larger engagements, it moves beyond kind of the current subscriptions that you're on, because we're talking about much larger kind of contract values, and obviously there's recurring revenue there. And so that's where we would start to partner more closely with you and show up together to your customers and work on winning very large projects. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I think we're also going to try to go over some of the stuff that we ran out of time last week on as well. So Steph, over to you to kick things off.
Yeah, that sounds great. And before we get started, I'd like to just hear from you all, what does the majority of your work consist of? Is it, primarily individual coaching? Are you doing more work with teams? What constitutes the majority of your client work these days? Because that will kind of help tailor our conversation.
Yeah, for me, it's threefold: leadership development, culture development, and team development. But I see the best value being provided through team development. And so that's what I really want to expand and explore for sort of 2024, really.
Okay, great, helpful. And Nancy, you're focused on individuals mostly with some team. So kind of how to expand from that individual to the team to maybe even beyond that to different functions, different kind of org-wide initiatives. And Gretchen, remind me, you do a lot of individual coaching, but you're doing more with teams now as well.
More with teams now. And I'd say the balance has definitely swung that way for me.
Okay.
But I'm very interested in this module in particular, the scaling up, because I've got a few kind of feelers out there in organizations, that might want to sort of adopt Deeper Signals as part of their organizational learning and development system. So I'm really interested very much to hear about the kind of enterprise and how we would partner on that from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Great. And David, James, thanks for joining. Is your work mostly with individuals, teams?
My one is I use this with my own team individually for a lot of the coaching. Been using it for a while, but then I'm also working with 3 other teams with their team leaders. So helping the teams go through it from a team point of view, but also with the managers for how they can use it for their coaching as well. So kind of a mix of the two.
Excellent. And David, how about you?
Primarily, I work with individuals in leadership
Okay.
assessment projects, but I have been thinking about jumping into the teams kind of offering. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I asked just because it's helpful to know where you start, and your clients come to you, maybe they just want individual coaching, but you can provide such better services as a coach when you have more information about the people that they work with. And if you're asked to go, to do a team building initiative or workshop, it's so helpful to understand the individuals in more depth about who they are and what's important to them, and also the teams that they work with and collaborate with. So no matter where you start or where you enter, there's ways to scale up and down. And you can kind of use this model to think about what that looks like, from increasing self-awareness at the individual level, and then helping leaders understand those individuals and how best to support them, and to help them understand the people around them at that team level. And of course, there's a lot of interesting work you can do with our tools to help teams navigate conflict, improve their communication, but you can take it up a step further and really help the organization understand their talent landscape and compare profiles across departments, across regions, and it can become a very powerful way to make more strategic talent decisions for succession planning, for hiring and selection, for reevaluating their performance models. So we'll kind of talk about what those different use cases are across levels. But thanks for sharing kind of where you are focused. That will help us think about how you can expand no matter where you're starting. So we talk about our platform as an end-to-end talent solution, and you can think about these 4 buckets as things that you would do maybe without even an assessment, just as a leadership coach or a manager. You're wanting to understand people, and maybe you're doing interviews, you're collecting feedback, you are maybe even using other psychometrics. But these are 2 powerful tools that can take a lot of that pressure off and can supplement the work you do to understand kind of who you're working with and what those needs are. And then we have feedback. So not only do we have really robust reports for individuals to help them understand who they are and how they show up as a leader, as a team member, what they're good at, what they need to work on. We also have the team reports, which we covered in the last session. So you can think about your job as a coach as providing, adding to this feedback, having deeper conversations based on these results. And the individual can understand their results standalone, but having that one-on-one debrief is always really, really helpful to ask questions, to help people think about these results in different ways, to challenge them. So that feedback piece is really key, and that leads into the coaching, identifying what those goals are, what they need help with. But to supplement the coaching work, you also have the learning journeys and the dynamo. So throughout every stage, you have a very valuable role as a coach. We're not taking your job away, but we're taking some of that weight off your shoulders and adding to the value you can contribute as a coach by providing insights throughout this coaching cycle. So let's talk about kind of what those use cases are at each level. And I'd love to hear, how you're using them across these levels. And if you have more ideas and things we can add to these lists. I think it's really obvious at the individual level that you're helping people increase their self-awareness. You're improving the feedback that they're not only receiving, but also able to give to others based on what they know about themselves and their own communication styles and how they communicate to their direct reports or to their team members. You're helping them come up with those personalized development plans and come up with the behaviors and actions that they can take to direct that change and promote that growth. With the teams, we can think about just your basic team building sessions. You're helping people get to know each other. Just getting together in that room can be so valuable. and having that time together, but to anchor that discussion with the core drivers and looking at each other's profiles along with that team profile, even without a set agenda. If you go in and pull that data even right before the meeting, I can guarantee you're going to have some value come of that conversation together, because people are so excited to learn more about each other and to think about the team as a whole. We also have some topics here that, excuse me, are some frequent asks from our clients. How can we increase trust? How can we improve how we work together and communicate with each other? How can we reduce conflict? And how can we really leverage our differences and manage the cognitive diversity on our team, really make the most of that? But I'm curious to hear from you, are there certain topics that you're hearing? Because as we build out these team products, we're thinking about what are those questions that managers, that clients have in regards to teams specifically, and kind of building out different playbooks about how you can use our tools to guide those conversations, to facilitate those workshops. So I know from our experience, the building rapport and cohesion, communication and trust are probably the top three. But what are you hearing?
I think that in the leaders umbrella, you've got the identify blind spots and manage risks, and I think that equally applies in the teams.
Okay,
so
yeah.
you say, okay, I'm working with a team that's really laid back and quite introverted, and so that's their blind spot and risk that they need to put the foot down and drive themselves a bit harder, and they need to create the opportunities for collaboration. So that, I think that equally jumps up there, and that's a real powerful one once you've got all the aggregated data together to go, this is how you are likely to operate in a certain situation, and be aware of that.
So these are sort of the traps we're falling into as a team because of our personality. Maybe
exactly.
dominant voices, kind of speaking over more laid back, reserved voices. How do we create more fairness and
all that
improve
individual
collaboration?
data is saying one thing, and once you bring it together in a team, then you see that the team likely to be like that, and you can equally identify that blind spot, which has been really, really powerful to say, actually, now we need to just change how the team is showing up, so you're not playing into that core risk.
I think that signifies some maturity too, the fact that the leader of the team kind of knows what those risks or blind spots are. And I think that's a good sign. I think sometimes teams come to us and they don't know what they need, or they say, we need to work on collaboration or trust, but that's not really the issue. And we have to kind of move a step back and kind of assess the team profile and understand what those team needs are before just coming in with a set topic. Do you find that as a coach?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. I was working with a team that was sort of high, high laid back, and also quite high pragmatic. And then they sort of, one person just chucked out, oh, we need to start doing performance appraisals. And everyone's like, yep, let's start. Well, that's actually a big piece of work if you're going to do that. And rather than just sort of bringing it up at the meeting and rubber stamping it and starting, let's actually have the discussion to go, is everyone on board to do this and do it well? Because everyone's seeing performance appraisals done poorly. So sort of the takeaway for that team was, when they're talking about we sort of game-changing decisions, let's actually really earmark them. Let's really bullet point them and get everyone on board before we, commit to something, and then we commit in entirety as opposed to commit in pieces, or actually don't commit. Then you 3 months down the track, you've got people dragging their heels on, again, performance appraisals, and all the effort goes to nowhere. So you're really being able to go, this is, you've got a tendency to do this. Let's earmark whatever it is and be deliberate about it. So that's really powerful.
I think the team session is actually a really interesting place to start. If a client comes to you and maybe wants individual coaching, maybe wants some teamwork, I recommend kind of guiding them to that team workshop to start with, because that allows you to assess everyone, to understand the different personalities working together, to anticipate maybe some of where those conflicts are arising, and to have that session to observe how people are communicating, And to even within an hour and a half, 2 hours, I think you can learn so much about how teams work together. They get something back, they have their own personal reports, but they have time to talk about their goals as a team and to go from there to maybe identify who would benefit from individual coaching or to identify what topics the team could focus on next. I think that's a nice introduction to this work that can create a lot of follow-up projects just based on that one short team session together. Yeah, Reese.
Yeah, and I think adding to that, it's like when we think about how you guys are showing up and the work that you can pitch for, it's like how all of these things hang together. They're not necessarily, well, they're not like exclusive of each other. And I think it's about, how can you, rather than, if we take the traditional approach, it's like, here's the senior team, they have a problem with, say, Craig, to your point, managing those blind spots. Let's give a workshop just to those people. What about their direct reports? And it's like, how do you then cascade the themes, ideas, the things you're working on that senior leadership team, like across the next level or across the entire business? So it's about thinking like a pyramid. It's like, okay, let's start with the leaders. We can give them the high touch coaching. They can go through the feedback sessions. And as well, we can then start offering the team reports to their individual teams. And now that team leader has already gone through the process, they understand why self-awareness is important. We have some playbooks, we have some guides, and with you as an advisor, you may not necessarily always be the ones running those sessions. However, you've started to embed deeper signals within the wider culture. You've been able to cascade it. And then ultimately, that's growing your impact and shifting you. Maybe you want to do this, maybe you don't, but shifting you away from just being a high impact executive coach to much more of a talent advisor, whereby you can use all the data and insights and really embed yourself within the culture and the talent strategy using deeper signals with your expertise, your third-party external perspective around really what they should be doing. So a good example or more practical example of this is with one of our customers. It's about building and preparing, the next generation of leaders. So they have their entire leadership bench go through the assessment. There, they'll get, a one-on-one debrief. There'll be maybe a collective workshop talking to them about the importance of self-awareness in the realm of leadership effectiveness. And then from there, we then start to talk about to become a good leader, you need to understand your team, you need to be able to lead inclusively, et cetera, et cetera. So then the next challenge is, or the next opportunity is to then assess their teams. They may get the light version of the core drivers, so you don't have to worry about explaining risks and some of the other kind of tricky language, which may, get kind of caught up on those that don't have access to a coach. But then the leader can use it as a tool to run their feedbacks with their sessions and improve their ability to coach on a one-on-one basis. So it's always kind of like, the one-on-one or the single team coaching is like the starting point. It's like, how can you then cascade it and start to really tap into that final quadrant under organizations, which is like getting more data about your culture, about your people, and plugging everything that you do into this larger strategy. Nancy, I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, that was really helpful. I really appreciate the insight right there, Reese. I was just going to say that my recent experience has been working with the leader. Initially, we had the teams do the assessments, and it was helpful for the leader to see that, but the analytics were really good because we were able to compare. One of the comparisons shows the leader against the team and what their team looks like collectively. And, this team has some very aggressive numbers that they need to hit. And the leader is very driven, she's high on the driven side of things and, outgoing, candid, all those things. And her team is very laid back and considerate. And she was kind of freaking them out in their meetings, So, what I got to help her with was taking a different approach. And I wasn't part of those team meetings, to your point. Like I got to help her see through using the comparisons and looking at the assessments and even like some of the other analytics on where her team was kind of shaking out, to come up with some ways to get her points across, but in a different using a different approach instead of being very direct. Like add some fun to it, for example, you know. And she has gotten amazing results. In fact, I'm working on a case study, which I might like some input from you, because they just did some unprecedented numbers.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think as well, just like another good example here, like just outside of teams, because we spoke a lot about that, is really on that individual, like how can you scale like your one-on-one coaching to maybe more to a one-to-many, but not in a team context. So again, if we think about, say, like a high potential program, or if you think about a cohort of senior leaders where the organization may not necessarily have budget for executive coaching, but they still want some help and support from you all, you could give everyone the assessment, have like a workshop or a session that speaks to, you know, the key themes and ideas, and then it's about using Dynamo learning journeys and all the other resources as a way to personalize the rest of, say, the development program that may be running within the organization. So then it's a way of scaling your services to meet maybe a smaller budget or just working more efficiently. I think all I'm trying to point out is other ways or non-traditional ways of using deeper signals beyond kind of that high touch approach. Because I know, speaking to many of you, that's been like an idea and a goal for your own businesses to kind of be able to do more with less.
And with Nancy, yeah, did you have another question?
No, that was me.
Oh, Gretchen, yeah.
I was just going to say one other really interesting piece of coaching that I've been doing recently is working with, you know, managers when they've got they're onboarding a new person, and using the comparison data to have that conversation about how we're similar, how we're different, how are we going to work together. And it just, you know, has such great feedback on how that's just fast tracked the relationship, so they don't, you know, have all that sort of, when they're very different from each other, butting up against each other. Super valuable for just an hour, you know. Exactly.
And to that point, Gretchen, it's like where the team reports become super helpful, because you could just add that new person into the team. Not only is that going to change the team report for itself, but then that manager has that coaching report, and so that they can always pull that up whenever they'd like to understand, okay, what does Stephanie like to work on? How should I best engage Stephanie? It's just another way of scaling your impact, because you don't have to be the one telling them to do that all the time. You can kind of put some of those tools in their hands.
And even if you're just coaching executives, I think it's worth having a discussion about rolling this out org-wide, because that will help you coach that leader about how to run that business. You know, even if you're only working with the senior team, but everyone takes the assessment, like Reese said, they're still going to get a lot of value from that self-directed learning. You're giving something back, but suddenly you have all of this beautiful data to bring into your coaching decision or coaching conversations with that senior team. Because as new, you know, changes roll out and they want to know which departments in the organization are really going to struggle with this change more than others, you know, which teams can I rely on to champion this, when you're talking about the culture of the organization and the role they play in shaping that, when you're talking about succession and ways to measure performance. Pulling up those compare features are really helpful, like you mentioned, Gretchen, but also looking beyond just to that senior leadership team to think about the entire business at large can be immensely valuable. To walk the leader through that data and to add value, even if you're just working with that one or two senior leaders. So I think sharing this case study will really bring all of these examples to life, because we'll talk about how this sort of rolled out organically, but all stemmed from a simple request to coach a team of senior leaders and maybe have a few team workshops without knowing, what the topic should be. It's just, we're going through a lot of change. Our leaders could use some support. We really want to strengthen our relationships. So can you help us? So very, very vague request. Of course, you have a lot of information collecting to do, but you can jump right in and kind of learn that information along the way and let that guide the plan. But this is how it sort of rolled out for us. So of course, we start with the assessment, core drivers, core values, understand the teams, have those initial coaching conversations where we're getting to know each person. And then we have that first team workshop where we're bringing them together. And like I mentioned earlier, so much comes out of that first session together, where we're seeing observing how they work together, bringing up certain challenges we weren't aware of before, talking about, the future and what their hopes are in terms of the direction of the business. So we're learning a lot there, and that helps inform our individual coaching sessions. But then we turned towards the organization and had more questions about, how are you measuring talent? What else are you doing to understand the talent you have and the talent you need? Do you have a set of competencies? So we were able to see what they had wasn't really working for them. We needed to revamp the competencies, take a fresh look at what they had, and kind of work together on recrafting those, and then map those competencies to the core drivers. So I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to work with the competency library or have done any of the competency mapping for your clients yet. But if not, we'll share more today and actually show you what those dashboards look like in a bit, because that's a really helpful piece of data on our advanced analytics tab that can really help you see the value of rolling this out org-wide and how this fits into the talent lifecycle.
I think as well, to that point, like if we just talk more about this actual client. So this is a company that just recently branded to a name called Serena, which is Brazil's largest producer and also reseller of green energy. So there are about 300 people, like a scale-up business, growing fast with a strong reputation and a very unique culture, one that is very entrepreneurial, risk-taking, very decisive, and one that wanted to continue, that was very cognizant of the fact that as it was growing, it needed to hold on to this culture. The way that they were approaching that was through what Stephanie had described, which was ensure that our leaders have those values. And so the way that we tackled it was, first by giving these assessments, working with the leaders, and running, basically strategic planning workshops through the lens of the core drivers, helping them understand what are their current values, what are the current talents and capabilities they're working with as a leadership team, and then ultimately, what do they need to change and improve to ensure that they are aligned to the strategic goals, and from a purely behavioral perspective. That then helped us think about, okay, what are those, can we put a label or a name onto what those values or competencies are? So things like having an entrepreneurial mindset, or being driven to deliver results, or having a customer focus, whatever it may be. We then took those descriptions to then start to build a plan for what it would look like across the entire organization. So what are the frameworks that they want to start to select and develop people against, given the outcomes from this executive senior team workshop? And that's where we can be partners to you all. So we have, a library of off-the-shelf competencies which measure a large variety of different soft skills, many of which, can be called different things, but the underlying behavior is the same thing. But we can partner with you here and support you in terms of that mapping and coming up with custom competencies. That not only means custom dashboards, but also custom report content that can be appended to the core drivers reports. So just putting that to one side for a second, just to say that totally when you're doing this kind of land and expand approach, where it's like you take the themes from the leadership session, it does require more advisory. We're here to support you on that. But that's kind of where we start to get to the point from a, say, commercial perspective. You're able to really grow your account with that client, because basically you're selling them a whole new type of subscription, a whole new type of service, whole new set of advisory. And as well, it then starts to lead to more recurring engagements, which, you know, are things that we always want. We want to be a part of the organization. We want to be a trusted talent partner. Competency design or mapping or learning how to, or being able to offer a more customized solution is a great way to show up and put that right foot forward.
And we were lucky that they were forward thinking enough to say, we know we want to connect these competencies with these behaviors. We want to measure these things. We want to be able to predict potential, and but we don't really know what that looks like yet. So in tandem, you know, we're coaching the leaders, we're working with that team, but separately we're working with HR to understand their HR tools and systems and make these connections for the future. So this is before, you know, the larger rollout. This is just some preparation for what those dashboards look like down the road. So once we were able to roll this out, that data would be ready. So after that team workshop, we were able to assess that next level down. And I think this is really where the magic happened, because we were then able to bring that data into our coaching conversations and help those leaders understand the different personalities on their teams. And things just started to click, you know, conflicts they were having with certain personalities, or people in the team maybe not getting along or not working together in the best way, or people maybe assigned tasks that weren't really suited to their skill sets or their strengths. So the things that we were talking about previously, you know, this really validated a lot of those things and helped us come up with some solutions. So, you know, even pulling up the compare feature within that coaching conversation, or asking about, you know, comparing leaders within the same team, having that data to anchor those conversations, I think really created a lot of momentum and also buy-in, and help the leaders see we want to see the team below them. We want to have access to everyone, because that's really going to help us help our managers lead their people and just scale all of that insight to help shift the culture in the right ways.
That's exactly it. It's like, I think by starting with that senior leadership team, we was able to get them bought in, but also socialize the concepts, the ideas, like what are we here to achieve? That then they obviously saw the value that it had for themselves as leaders and their own leadership team, that it then led to them wanting to offer it to their own teams. But it also created familiarity. Now, when it comes to rolling out you know, large projects across an enterprise, there is the cultural socialization, internal communications that obviously need to be addressed, and that can be quite complicated. Now, given your relationship focused approach that you will have, this is a great way of kind of getting over that hump, because basically you are using your own customers, like the actual end people that you're coaching, as champions to support that rollout, to be able to confidently talk about it to their own teams, which then made it very easy for us to widen the scope of, you know, who's going to then take a deeper signals assessment at those middle and lower levels, in service of leaders having better conversations with their teams. And then those leaders could also talk about why it's valuable for their own direct reports to think about their talents, think about you know, how they show up and their level of self-awareness, how they think about risks, and so on. So ultimately, like what started as, you know, working directly with, you know, a team of say 10 to 15, you use those 15 to then cascade the key themes and ideas across the entire business. And you're there working closely with or we were there just working closely with their head of people and culture, who was then, you know, just take care of the rollout and the kind of the, and this wasn't like a free people. So something can be, of course, the ability to team up and take on even bigger projects. But yeah, so Gretchen, I saw you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Reese. Just like a practical question, you know, I mean, in an ideal world, you would go into an organization and you would talk to them about a big vision across their whole organization and start with that. But actually, probably the reality in my world is I'm going to start with 1 or 2 people and maybe one team, usually the L&D team or the HR team or something like that, and do a session with them, and then they might get the light bulb and think, oh, we need to do this, you know, across our whole organization. How do I, you know, if they wanted then an enterprise account of their own, which makes sense because that future proofs them, how can you migrate stuff from my account to their account in that case, so that because I wouldn't want to set them up, you know, to have to redo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few things here. So the first is like really about positioning and selling, and then there is kind of the management and kind of the account side of it. So I'll come back to that bit. I think in terms of positioning, I think there's 2 things or 3 things that we've kind of learned is that you have people or like personas that I think we come across. We have HR leaders, L&D leaders that are keen to think big and, you know, have a broad vision and really want to make a very big impact very quickly. Those people, like pitching the big idea and the big solution to them is very attractive. They're on board with it very, very quickly. Then you have those that sit in more, say, traditional process-driven organizations, or they are just a bit more a bit more, how should I say, like just a bit more pragmatic in terms of how things can work, in which case they're like pitching the big picture or everything you can do is probably not that helpful. So it's more around 2 things. It's like, 1, like trying to identify like the right program or the right kind of or the most immediate problem that you can solve. And then the second thing is like then being aware and guiding them to say, hey, like we made progress by improving this leader or this leadership team or whatever it may have been, to say, wouldn't it be great if we could go 1 step further and solve that other problem that is connected to this previous problem we've solved. So what you're doing there is you're building trust, credibility, and momentum to then expand what you're currently offering. That has proven very successful as well for different types of organizations. So you've got those 2 approaches. Now, for the second part of your question, which is more around like, how would I actually engage it with that customer in terms of subscriptions, accounts, and so on. So the way that it would work is like that customer would have a separate account. So let's say you'll have your own accounts and you to work with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola would have its own account and they would have their own administrators, their own users, etc. And you, as the talent advisor, the person working with them, could also be an administrator on that account as well. Gretchen, to your point, if you had, say, worked with a leader or a team, or even more than that, under your own account, but now they buy their own enterprise plan, we can definitely migrate them over. There's no issue there. In terms of pricing, so as you would have seen on our website, we have enterprise pricing plans which start at a much higher volume, like around 250 minimum users, and they can be customized based on different features. So if they want Teams or if they want Dynamo competencies, that's all an add-on. And then what we would do is work with you on a case-by-case basis, depending on the size and scope of the project, in terms of what that revenue share looks like. So if you are just handing the customer over and you want us to manage everything, that would be kind of one type of revenue share, or if you want to be more involved, that would change that split.
So we have a much more flexible case-by-case basis, and that would be separate from the subscriptions and plans that you currently have to manage more, I would say, high-touch, bespoke coaching individuals and teams. But the idea is, like, we want to be partners, and be able to support you in winning bigger pieces of work. And by doing so, we're obviously able to offer additional expertise. You're able to bring a lot of expertise in terms of understanding the client, the talent strategy, the coaching, etc. So I think, like, together we can really kind of have a winning formula.
And I think there could be some concern, if the enterprise has their own platform, am I going to be, not needed in the future? What's my role look like? And I think organizations really do need that support, someone to direct them to the right insights, to help them understand that data, to identify different needs, for different teams, and new workshops and new coaching work that might come out of that. So I do think having a partner that really understands the tool, that has experience in working with other clients with the same diagnostics, I think it's very, very valuable to have that one-on-one touch and to help them understand this vision and what could be possible. Because the thing is, teams are always changing. People are coming in and out. It's not something you understand and file away. It's something you have to keep coming back to, because it's, living data, and people need someone to kind of guide them through it, because it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're then connecting this to other sources of data, like we did with this client, pulling in some demographics or performance data. I think the use cases really become endless when you make these connections, and you're able to think about how can we integrate these tools within the selection process, or with one client, we're using this within performance management as a way to debias their ratings. So they have they have to rate employees with this checklist at the end of the year. And they might, be, especially if we know that they're highly agreeable, they're going to give good ratings to everyone. This can sort of challenge that and help them see people's potential in these different areas, to say, am I being too harsh? Am I being too lenient? So there's really a use case for core drivers throughout that entire employee life cycle, from selection to succession.
And I think it changes kind of who you are trying to interact with on the customer client side. Oftentimes when we think about these larger programs, it is working more with, say, the heads of HR, the heads of people, heads of L&D, which, I think if we think about individual and team coaching, that request can come through, really any part of the business that is having a problem and recognizes the need for some facilitation and support. But I think it's then, if we want to go broader, it's like forming that relationship and, positioning and being able to offer like really good strategic advice around someone's talent strategy. And that's really kind of what you're selling at that point, and what you're being able to offer is not tools. I think that's kind of the wrong way to think about it. It's like, here's deeper signals, buy this tool, but rather like you have a problem, and given all the different levers on the platform that you can pull with your own expertise and the expertise that we can offer, we can really come up with an approach that's going to, help you overcome those obstacles and like solve those problems. I think that's, always the catch. It's like, the assessments are not a means to an end. It's like it's not the end itself. It's a vehicle. It's a way of understanding, diagnosing, and supporting kind of these other strategic problems. And so, Nancy, I see you raise a question, addressing competition, if they say with DISC or Clifton, etc. Yeah, that's a good one, right? So, there's obviously many great tools out there with a lot of data support and a strong following. I think we try not to get into those conversations where it's like we're better than, insert brand, because I feel like that's sets up a false dichotomy. I think it's about, again, going to what I was saying, our tools are instruments to solve a particular goal. And so if you are, say, trying to solve how can I offer my high potential program, which is say 100 people, an affordable, scalable, self-directed solution, well, Deeper Signals can do that because we are affordable. We can offer like aggressive volume discounts. And also you have these feature-rich reports with learning journeys and Dynamo, which enable the person to work through it. So it's like great if you want to continue to use MBTI or Clifton or Hogan or whatever else may be. Like those are great tools to solve other problems and other applications. And this is how we think we can tackle that problem. So it's less about trying to compare the widgets, but rather keep it focused on the problem, the ease of use, and how you can really help them achieve their goals. Yeah, Ed.
Hey, Reese, quick question. Has there ever been a time when you've seen any clients utilize Deeper Signals with a post test? So we do the initial, everyone goes through some sort of programmatic thing using the the learning journey, Dynamo, all that stuff, and then using a post test. And if you have, what would be a recommended time for the post test so that you actually give people time to grow and develop?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And not to be a psychologist about it, but it's one like personality change is like one of those things that doesn't happen simultaneously. I think like, so to answer the question, yes, we have had people use it as a pre and post test. Although I would not suggest that is like the right use of the core drivers, because personality, this is where I will put on my pointy hat and be an academic for a second. It's like it is pretty stable, right? So unless you are like actively working on changing your behavior, it's unlikely you'll see huge changes. And even if you were to bring about some change, you can argue, how much am I changing my personality, which is like underlying tendencies, versus I've learned a new behavior, a new coping mechanism, a new strategy to manage myself. Like you may have seen this in your own feedback sessions, where it's like someone gets a core risk of, say, being super intense, right? The extreme of being passionate. And it's like, yeah, I know that it's not really an issue anymore because of XYZ life experiences and work I've done to improve that. So it's like we've flagged something, but it's not necessarily like an actual issue for that person because they've already developed a response to it. Now, to where I'm going with this is the better way to think about it is not so much have you seen personality change, but have you seen behavior change? Like, have I been able to improve becoming more resilient, even if underlying I am still a very passionate, intense person? And so that's where Dynamo is going as a product. So right now you can choose your goals, you get coaching feedback, and you can choose your next goal. What we are working on to come out in Q1 of next year is at the end of that journey, you can pulse your team or your colleagues to give you feedback on how much change have they seen on the behavior you are working on. So then if I said, I've committed to spending the next 30 days or 60 days improving my resilience, can I get some feedback to show that I have become more resilient? Rather than say, have I been able to improve my emotional stability score, which is probably not, but I've been able to manage it better. Is that an okay answer? Generally, we say for a retest, you should do it like once a year if you're going to continually like retake the tool. But I wouldn't expect large swings unless you're actively working on it. And even then, it's more about kind of focusing on narrow behaviors rather than broad trends. So you could use maybe the sub-drivers to give you a bit of insight there.
I have an example too, Reese. So I was coaching someone that was really reserved, but in the middle between laid back and driven. And he was really working on showing, being more assertive, speaking up more in meetings. So we identified what those behaviors were that he wanted to practice. He also went through a lot of big life changes that ended up kind of giving him some more confidence, and he had a bigger role by the end of the year. So after a year of coaching, and I think those life changes were a big part of it, and because he was more in the middle, he did go from laid back to driven. within that span of the year, but reserved in those traits that were more in that high range, more on the ends of the scales, those did remain the same. So you might see slight changes, but if someone is in the middle, that could actually change their driver with a lot of focused effort.
And I'll clarify, I was thinking about this much more from like managing the risks piece. And so kind of both of those answers combined really helped me in terms of, and language is important, right? And so talking about it as behavior change, not personality changes, it's night and day, right? And so that's an important reminder, but once a year and making sure that it's framed out in the appropriate way. So one more question, also because I have to jump off in a few minutes because I've got a meeting at 4. What is your recommendation regarding sharing results of deeper signals more broadly? Because with such great information and data, it's easy to just like other assessments. A lot of organizations will say like every individual owns theirs. What's the benefit then more organizationally, right? Because we can't use that information to interact,
so I think,
right?
Right. So it depends on the culture of the organization. So we have some customers that are much more hesitant about sharing and understand those concerns. And then we have others which are much more transparent and willing to share. I think it all comes down to psychological safety. And so that's a whole other opportunity to coach that organization around. But putting that aside, we encourage sharing of reports. We think that's obviously where a lot of richness and value can be had. Being able to say, I'm candid and disciplined and you are considerate and flexible. Like, what does that mean for the both of us? I think it's a really cool conversation. Now, that said, and that reports are designed to be shareable, right? You see there's a share link in every single report. Now, that said, maybe not everyone wants to do that, and that's totally okay. So users can opt out of sharing their data with team reports. So they can go into their settings and say, I don't want my manager to be able to see this report. And then, of course, you have the administrators, which are like a privileged few that can, access the data. Users can always delete their data as well. So there's also different things we provide to let the user decide. But again, that's a part of like the strategic planning that you would have with your partner on the enterprise side. What should be the recommendations? Like, we can do both, but what do you think would be best? You can obviously provide your advice. But yeah.
Now I'm can go back to wrapping up this slide and really identifying that strategic partner in the organization to share this vision with, to understand, any concerns about privacy, who's going to own this data, who are the administrators going to be. You're not going to have those conversations with the people you're coaching, but start with that, whatever that piece of work is that they're requesting, but find someone in that organization that can really become that partner so that you can share what this could look like more broadly and all of the opportunities that exist to roll this out more across the organizations. Thanks, Ed. So we're running out of time. I think it would be great if we could, we'll come back to this in future sessions. We'll do some interpretation practices, talk about how you can design workshops using these team skills. But how about we go to that competency or that analytics page real quickly so people can see what that looks like, Reese?
Absolutely. So.
And while you're doing that, I want to go back to Nancy's question about, addressing the competition. And as a consultant that worked with lots of different psychometrics, I think people really, you start at the top always. Leaders want to go through these assessments, the coaching. They want to scale it with their teams, but they can't. You can't do a one-on-one debrief with hundreds of people. You can't afford to use some of those more expensive assessments out there at scale. So that's one differentiator. And on the other side, you have tools that are a little bit more fluffy. Maybe they're used more for team building or to have, conversations about getting to know each other, but those aren't valid enough to be used in a more predictive way within the selection system or for the executive level for coaching conversations. They're just not quite sophisticated enough. So I think we really bridge that gap and we offer something that's really scientifically valid and sophisticated, but also really accessible across levels. So that's how I kind of like to position it. Yeah.
So what you see on the screen is if you have a Coach Max subscription, you would be able to view something like this. So this analytics section is like an enhanced version of the insights and compare feature that you have within each assessment. So what you can have is, a single view where you can see both core drivers and core values. Now, where this gets interesting is that we not only can measure, off-the-shelf competencies. So we have a capability framework that's a part of every Max subscription, which can be organized into managing self, projects, and others that take the assessment data, recombine it to give more insights into specific, soft skills. What we can do, and this is much more for, say, enterprises, we can integrate with their HRIS system, so we can have all the data about an individual, about an employee, including, performance metrics. So we can visualize all of that data, including custom competencies, in one place. So let's say you want to look at a particular team. Let's see if I have some data. You can look at, say, my team. I can hit apply. And then what we see is not only my team's aggregate profile on core drivers, core values, but then we can see aggregations across all the other data that we're aggregating from external sources, including the competencies. Similarly, you could search for a specific user. So let's say I'm going to just search for myself. Okay, I've got many versions of me in this account. And I choose the one that has no data. That's okay. Let's find someone else. Okay, this person, Glenn. So then we can view Glenn's profile all on one page and have access to all of this data, not each assessment, but competency and even performance data. You can then compare and contrast as well. So if we want to look at a team versus a particular individual across competencies, we can do that. This would be helpful, say, for new team members. This would be helpful for coaching leaders that are new to a team, or even when you're starting to think about shortlisting certain candidates for a role, wherever that may be in the organization. Do you want to see how they would compare with their team, or even compare to other candidates? Where are their similar strengths, risks, and so on? Of course, you wouldn't have the performance data, but you would be able to visualize their scores on those competencies. And again, these dashboards can be customized. So if you have your own framework and we work with you, or your customer has their own framework, we can work with you to do that mapping and to build these dashboards for you. And then the final thing is really around, starting to use the assessment data to debias some of your decisions and lead to more strategic decision-making around your talent. So with this competencies table, I can select, say, specific scores, again, not only from the data that I'm taking from external sources, but also on my competencies. I can then see each individual's scores on each of those competencies as well. And then I can start to make benchmarks. So let's say I want to create a benchmark for a certain role because we've done some internal work that tells us engineers need to be high on attention to detail, being accountable, and adapting to change, as an example. What I could then do is choose those competencies from my list. And then I can set those score ranges. I can then save that for later, hit apply. And then what that would do is it would shortlist everyone in my team, my department, my organization that meets that criteria. I can then do something with that talent. Do I then want to fast track them on a development program? Do I want to, give them different resources? Do I want to shortlist them for a particular role? Whatever it may be. But the idea is that you're using all the assessment data now to move away from kind of just individual or team-based insights and actually getting closer to giving people tools to think about strategic workforce decisions. And these are tools that you can have and provide access to your clients and customers. So to Gretchen's point, if you were to partner with a large enterprise that would be interested in using these features, they would have their own account, there would be administrators, And we have tools and systems in place to train them up so they can drive some of this activity themselves. So you don't have to be the ones doing it all, but rather you're the ones providing direction and advice, and you're putting tools into their hands to solve their problems. So that's a very just quick high-level view. I know we're over time, but I just wanted to give you a sneak peek. But the idea is we can work with you to think about these very large organizations and come up with strategies and plans together where we can be partners to help win bigger pieces of work and ultimately drive, more impact for our organizations, their leaders, and their teams.
So as you can see, there's a lot of use cases, a lot of different directions we could take this conversation, and that's why we really want to keep these going. We really want to provide an ongoing space for our coaches to get together, to share ideas, to ask questions. So our hopes for the new year are to have workshops focused on interpretations, looking at different profiles, different team profiles, and share, the tips and tricks for some more advanced interpretations. We also want to have a session about core values and how to use core values in your work or together with core drivers and the power that can create. Other ideas, we're open. So if you have, certain topics that are interesting, please let us know, and we'll think about organizing sort of a calendar events geared towards coaches like you. So thank you all so much for being here. We'll send out the recording and the slides, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday and hope to see you again in the new year.